sign up to help with VBS or to register your kids to VBS. Information is in the stuff that's going around. And lastly, boys-ish folks, Friday at our house, anytime after 3.
Sorry, yeah, we're sorry, it's a half day. We're good. All right, yeah, we're good.
Is approval of the board, the chairs and the board for next 2 years.
And the dishwasher.
We're going to talk about dishwashers, but okay. It's on the.
It's a bonding thing.
All right, anything else? Sue?
A few years ago, we got a grant and we got film put on for security on the doors here and the school doors. They're still on, we still need them. Please do not put anything on the windows,
On the inside.
on the inside. Something was put on, we've taken it off and put it on the outside in a sleeve protector. You can do that. But don't put anything on the inside.
I'm in charge of art and decoration for VBS, and we're going to have a great Eden in here. You guys will get an opportunity to see it prior to it. I'm asking you, as you're dust cleaning out your houses, if you happen to have one of these, it can be broken or not broken, but don't want it anymore, please bring it in. It makes a great tree. Branches for palm tree. So, yeah, thank God for Pinterest. Also, any coat wire. Coat wires?
Wire
coat
That
hanger.
one, you know, the things you're not allowed in your closet anymore. And on June 6th and 7th, if you have some wonderful little tots, or if you would like to get yourself into some paint, we're going to have a big craft day. Please bring your lunch. Water will be provided, and we're going to be down here making bugs. Bugs, leaves, whole bunch of stuff. You know, God had 6 days, we don't.
The good news is we don't have to create nearly as much. All right. Any announcements for Saint Group before we dismiss for Sunday school? All right. Just one. Let's do our catechism du jour. The Fourth Commandment. So let's read this together. The Fourth Commandment. Honor your father and your mother. And what does this mean? We should fear and love God, so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. All right, Sunday school kids are dismissed for Sunday school. Let's see, as we prepare to get ready, let's see, we have, again, those of you who are in the early service, you know, we have a special guest with us today. Our guest preacher is Reverend Dewitt. Also pleased to have his wife, Kathy, with us today, but I will not point her out. But he is here mainly because he was our guest presenter for a convocation that took place yesterday at Emmanuel Kettering on the Great Commission, including which would include those within the LGBTQ plus community. And it was a really good presentation. About 30 of us from various congregations from the circuit. And it will be available as a recording after they do some editing of like breaks and things like that. So once I get the information for like when it is available as a recording on the manual's website, I'll let you know, and you may view the recording if you are interested. So yes.
You have my email, right?
Yes, sir.
If they have questions for me, give them the email, let them email me, and we'll talk about it.
Very good. And if you have any follow-up questions, just let me know and I can get you Pastor Witt's email address. All right. Very good. So, what I'd like to do for today is kind of just cover a little bit into our Bible study from Isaiah chapter 33. We'll get this going, and then I would like to stop just a little bit early. It allows some time for questions and answers that you may have while we have Pastor Dewitt here. Either as my first supervisor as a pastor up in Northwest Ohio. I try to behave, when I figure that out. Or as a retired chaplain for the Air Force, or as an expert in dealing with how do we address the homosexual community from a godly perspective. So he can answer some of those questions if you have it. All right, the Song of Woe, a Destroyer. So we are at Isaiah chapter 33, and just going to do a portion of this chapter, the first 12 verses. So let's get into the context. So, as I pointed out before, this is a series of songs of woe, which are usually the way they're translated in our English Bibles, or sometimes the translation will say, or woe to, or behold, again, depending on your translation. And most of these are really about Israel, northern, southern kingdom, or Jerusalem, and they really hit home to God's people, with one exception, which we're going to talk about today. The other major context with this passage of the song is this begins a transition, if you will, in the book of Isaiah. In chapters 1 to 32, the focus is on Zion, in particular its sin, its punishment, salvation, and how Israel, how Jerusalem relates to the other nations around it. And a big player in this is God's punishment that he is going to give through the nation of Assyria, and what God is going to do about Assyria. So that's a main focus in the first part. And then in these couple chapters here, there seems to be a little bit of both, the beginning and the end of Isaiah, and things are going to start moving. And especially when you get into chapter 36 and beyond, they're going to still focus on Zion, still going to focus on Jerusalem, still going to hear a lot about what God has to say to his people, but it's going to be in some new ways. It's going to start Isaiah is going to start personifying Zion as a woman, which eventually, if you hear in the book of Revelation today, they're talking about God's people as the bride of Christ. And so this is kind of like a foreshadowing, if you will, or getting us prepared for the work of Jesus. And this is going to become quite evident, especially as we get towards the end of Isaiah. Also, chapter 36 and following is going to really focus on the events that take place after Isaiah's days. Okay? A lot of the things in chapters 1 and 32, while they do address things of the future, really do hone in on what is going on in Isaiah's day. And that there's going to be a shift for some more future challenges and future ways of future gifts from God and salvation that God is going to give, and that's going to be clearer, especially moving forward. And then finally, instead of focusing so much on Assyria as kind of the major player, in the world, it's going to start focusing on another empire that's going to come up after them, in particular Babylon and Persia. So it's going to start focusing on some empires that will be in power after Isaiah's days. All right. But this little section here is going to start transitioning towards that. It's going to start hinting towards some more future events. So with that, let's get to the text. Isaiah chapter 33. All right. So, one way to kind of see how this passage is kind of organized, most of our Bibles will have one heading for all of chapter 33. Okay? Most of our Bibles will have a heading for all of chapter 33. I have, "O Lord, be gracious to us." Are there any other headings in our English Bibles? Yep.
Judgment of God.
Judgment of God. Is it for the whole chapter?
Yes.
Yep.
Salvation for those who trust in God.
Salvation for those who trust in God. For the whole chapter? Yep.
Trouble for Assyria and help for God's people.
Trouble for Assyria, help for God's people. Ooh, I like that. All right. Probably for the whole chapter too, huh? Yep. Okay.
Woe to the spoiler.
Woe to the spoiler. All right. Interesting.
Mine says, oh, to the destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, woe to the destroyer. Yeah. Interesting, right? So our English Bibles and translations focus on one or two, or in some cases, both, right? There's some woe being spoken, some warning being spoken to either Assyria or some kind of destroyer or spoiler, and at the same time, hope. Hope for God's people, hope for Israel, God's salvation for us, right? So, which one is it? Yes. 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 All right. So, here we go. And I kind of like the ones that are more positive, because the woe is really spoken clearly in verse 1, and then it really switches to a very hopeful note, and a hopeful response of God's people, even beginning as early as verse 2. And I really want to focus on verses 2 to 6, because I think this is a really great passage, really helpful for us and for our faith. And it also is the most poetic and most song-like in this chapter. So here we go. Our Song of Woe, Isaiah chapter 33, verse 1. Can someone read that for us?
Ah, you destroyer, you yourself have not been destroyed, you traitor, whom none has betrayed. When you have ceased to destroy, you will be destroyed, and when you have finished betraying, they will betray you.
All right. So who is the destroyer or spoiler? Who is it? Who is it? Yeah, we normally associate it with Assyria. Okay? And Isaiah chapter 10, verses 5 to 7. I'm going to just kind of glance over it. But yeah, it establishes the king of Assyria as that destroyer, God's destroyer. All right. But at the same time, God says, woe to you. All right? Woe to you. So why does God declare woe to the destroyer? Okay. So let's take a look at a little bit of context. 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 to 35. A little bit of a big section here, but really helpful in kind of describing what was going on with Assyria during this time and why God was really declaring woe to them. So, 2 Kings 18. Okay, I'll read to you a little bit. Beginning verse 1. In the third year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He removed the high places and broke the pillars and cut down the Asherah, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days the people of Israel had made offerings to it. It was called Nehushtan. Interesting. So they took something that was really great, right, that God used, and started worshiping it, right, and making sacrifices to it. And Hezekiah said, no more. We're not going to do that. All right, number 5. He trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah after him, nor among those who were before him. For he held fast to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept the commandments that the Lord had commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him. Wherever he went, he prospered. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. He struck down the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. So a nice little description of the big picture of King Hezekiah. Now, here we go with his dealings with Assyria, verse 9. And as we go through this, think about how does King Sennacherib and his messenger personify destroyer, traitor, betrayer? Okay, those are the terms used in Isaiah. Okay, here we go. Verse 9. In the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years, he took it. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. The king of Assyria carried the Israelites away to Assyria and put them in Halah and on the harbor, the river of Gozan, and the cities of the Medes, because they did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant, even all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. They neither listened nor obeyed. Right? So the kingdom up north was destroyed, right? And whose will was it that the kingdom of the northern tribes of Israel was to be captured, besieged, and destroyed? Whose will was it? It was God's will, right? Taking a look at verse 12, what was the reason? They were naughty, right? They did not obey the voice of the Lord. They were extremely disobedient and transgressed God's covenant. All right. So here we go, verse 13. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lasik, saying, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will bear. And the king of Assyria required of Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house. At this time Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the doorposts that Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. Isn't that nice? Right? You have a foreign power coming, knocking on your doorstep. What can I give you so that you go away? Right? What can I give you that you can go away? But notice, where does King Hezekiah get this stuff? His temple, right? Take down or get all the precious metals and valuable stones and things like that from the temple, all the things that were dedicated to God, and give it to this nation, this king, and say, great, we're done with you, right? Okay, wrong, right? Let's say, there's a lot of things wrong with this, right? So, number one, Hezekiah's maybe lack of trust in the Lord in this one. But there might be a temptation to get a little greedy. So let's look at verse 17. The king of Assyria sent the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh. I love those titles. With a great army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. When they arrived, they came and stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is on the highway to the washer's field. And when they called for the king, there came out to them Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder. And the Rabshakeh said to them, say to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, on what do you rest this trust of yours? Do you think that mere words and strategy are power and power for war? In whom do you now trust, that you have rebelled against me? Behold, you are trusting now in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it, such as Pharaoh, king of Israel, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Come now, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you are able on your part to set riders on them. How then can you repulse a single captain among the least of my master's servants, when you trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Moreover, is it without the Lord that I have come up against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Interesting. Who told him to go? God. Yet, what does he say in verse 22? Do you really want to trust in him? What's his opinion of the Lord? Not very high. Right? Let's get the fuller story and then think about this for just a moment. Verse 26. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna, and Joah said to the Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in the language of Judah, within the hearing of all the people who are on the wall. We're getting a little nervous. But the Rabshakeh said to them, has my master sent me to speak these words to your master and to you, and not to the men sitting on the wall, who are doomed with you to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? Then the Rabshakeh stood and called out in a loud voice in the language of Judah, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you out of my hand. Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord by saying, the Lord will surely deliver us, and this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me, and come out to me. Then each one of you will eat of his own vine, and each one of his own fig tree, and each one of you will drink the water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die. And do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim and Hena and Ivah? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? Ooh. What's this guy's opinion of God?
Not at all. In fact, it winds up being not necessarily a speech to the people on the wall. It's a challenge to God the Almighty
Yeah.
to do something. You know, like, we don't think you're anything at all. And the king of Assyria is much better. So,
Yeah.
and he's making a pitch to the populace to come along with them to Assyria and leave the government back behind so they can just wallow in their own death.
Yeah, one God among many.
Yeah.
Right? It's like all the other gods everyone's prayed to before, none of them have worked.
Right.
What, it basically says, right, he makes a pitch to them. What makes you think that your God is any better or any different? Right?
But in verse 25, it says, God told me to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he thinks that Israel has lost the favor of God.
Okay. Yeah. That they have lost the favor of God. And we know that the northern tribes did, right? It is clearly revealed to us earlier, right? The northern tribes had definitely lost the favor of God, and that's why God told them to go and do it. Right?
So it's an interesting point. Is God impotent because we're not saving Israel because they've turned from him?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what he thinks.
Yeah. The one thing that he got wrong was you should have stopped at Samaria. Right? You should have stopped at Samaria. God did not reveal to go to Jerusalem. It's not that we're aware of. Right? But he's going to keep going. He's going to keep going. Anything else as far as his opinion of the Lord?
He's trash talking God.
Okay, yes, he is doing some trash talking of God. And, just the words and the way he speaks. There were two things that really jumped out at me, right? Verse 32, towards the end, right? So let's say you've got a pious king who says, we are going to trust in the Lord, right? What does the Rabshakeh say about that? What does the king say about that? Not so much. Don't let him deceive you or mislead you, thinking that you can trust in the Lord. That's a pretty powerful word. The other thing I noticed is, especially when, let's see, in verse 31, 32, 33, go ahead.
It's did God really say?
Did God really say?
It's the same. It's not any different than what Satan asked Adam and Eve. Did God really say he was going to deliver you? Because, I mean.
Because who is going to deliver you? Take a look. I mean, when I read this, I was like, this sounds kind of familiar. Read, thus says the king, the great king of Assyria. What does that sound like? Okay, it sounds like it doesn't matter. But it also sounds like God. Like, doesn't God speak that way? Thus saith the Lord, right? The Lord God Almighty. And then talking about, each one will eat of his own vine. Each one will eat of his own fig tree. You will eat and drink of your own cistern.
You will surely not die.
Yeah.
You're not going to die. Just come over here and
Yeah.
do this thing, and it's going to be fine. It's Satan. Satan's word.
Yeah. And 32, right? Until they come and take you away to a land like your own land. A land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die. What does that sound like? I mean,
Satan in the garden.
it sounds like Satan in the garden. And it also sounds like the Lord making a promise to the promised land. Right? A land flowing with milk and honey. Right? Just the way that it's presented, it sounds eerily similar. Right? He speaks as if he's God, making a promise of salvation to them. Right? And you're right. If you want to boil it down, go back to the Garden of Eden. Right? So how does King Sennacherib and his messenger personify destroyer, traitor, betrayer? The terms that were used in Isaiah chapter 33, verse 1. Yeah. How can we call? Yeah.
Well, from sort of a betrayer position, he takes all the money from Hezekiah, and then he's like, okay, but not enough, right? Like, he lets him believe he's gonna let him go, right? You give me this, I'll go away. He takes all the money, and then he's like, just kidding.
Okay.
No backseas.
So there's a little betrayal here, right? We paid you this tribute so that you would leave us alone, and you're still coming.
They were headed a conquering army that had already carried away the northern tribes of Israel.
Yeah. They were doing a lot of destruction, and even labeled a lot of gods who couldn't deliver, all other nations out of their hands. Yeah.
They're attempting to be divisive, like purposefully, right? Because in 26, they asked them to speak in Aramaic so that people don't hear what's being negotiated, right? And the guy's like, no, I'm gonna let them hear, right? Because he knows if people become afraid, right, they're gonna fragment, they're gonna seek their own good, right? And he's gonna be able to undermine the solidarity of Israel as a unit, right? Because people are gonna seek their own good and go after what's being promised to them.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, one here in the front, one back. Go ahead.
And don't we use these same adjectives when we talk about the devil?
We do. Right. The devil is also a destroyer, a traitor, a betrayer. Right. Those are titles we use for the devil. Yeah.
Well, and similarly to that, you can see this person has been well versed in what the Jewish belief was at the time. He's taken those words and thrown it right back at them. Even the whole do not let yourself be deceived or misled. I mean, we have those very words in our catechism, right? Yeah. So the devil, the world, and our sinful nature may not deceive us or mislead us. And so there's a whole sense he went and did his research, so he could turn the words that they all hear and they all know around on them.
Yeah. It goes back to the Garden of Eden, right? That's the devil's temptation, right? Yeah. Did God really say you shall not die, right? Or when the devil tries to tempt Jesus, right? If you are the Son of God, right? Even quote scripture, right? Oh, drop yourself or throw yourself down from the top of this, building, right? Because God will protect you, right? He will command his angels concerning you.
I wouldn't trust the promises that were made in verse 32 either. It sounded like, well, we're just going to relocate you someplace just as nice.
And it'll be really nice. We promise.
A hot tub, it'll be great.
Well, yeah. It is a little bit of a bait and switch, right? Obviously, it's much better than verse 27, what he promises if you stay. But yeah.
But in all honesty, they would be enslaved.
Yeah, they would be. All right. So what is God declaring to this destroyer in Isaiah chapter 33? So we'll go back to Isaiah 33 now. What is he declaring to this destroyer? Let's take a look at Isaiah 33 verse 1. You're going to be destroyed. Yeah.
And you were really just a tool, a pawn.
Yeah.
Like, I used you, but now I'm done with you, and you are not worthy either.
Yeah. I used you for my own means. You are my tool to do some destruction, to bring about my justice, my judgment. But you're not a very useful tool. You're done.
Smack you down.
And it is time that you also reap what you sow. Right? When you've ceased to destroy, you will be destroyed. Right? When you have finished betraying, they will betray you. Right? Their very own means that they used against others for oppression and destruction are going to be used against them. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
Sennacherib had overstepped the authority that God had given him.
Yeah.
And that's why it's time for him to lose his head.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, he lost his head metaphorically, and now he's going to be judged for it. Yeah, and the same pattern will actually come in later in the book of Isaiah with another nation. Yeah, go ahead.
But I think it harkens back also to what we often hear. Jesus says to Peter, "Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword." Right? God did not want David to be the one to build his temple because he was a man of war, but his son was a man of peace, and Solomon built the temple for God. I think you can also see in history the nations. You always have these upstarts that break, the corrupt, calcified ruling powers right now. You have some upstart that comes, breaks it apart, and we get rid of whatever was stale and no good. And there's some goodness in what is coming, but then when they try to establish it, suddenly we have new corruption and new problems emerging, and we need a new upstart to yet replace that one. So you just get this cycle going on of somebody comes in, brings a lot of freshness and fairness into a corrupt system, and then they become the tyrant and the corrupt, and they are in turn broken down. And so I think it makes sense, not necessarily just even Sennacherib. Yes, he went beyond, but in general, there's a lot of, all the nations, we all sin, we all have corruption, it is in our nature, and so God takes us down a notch or two, breaks the back of the oppressor, and then he raises up men of peace to build it. But then someone, sin rolls in, the deceiver comes in and says, did God really say this is the best way? I don't know. Maybe we don't want to go with this man of peace. Maybe we could have a little bit, you could have so much more if you went over here, and sin tempts us away from that.
Yeah. Life goes before a fall.
Yes, it does.
Every time.
Yes, it does.
Except condition.
Yeah. And yet the one constant is the Lord, right? The one constant is the Lord. What I will do is for next week I'll pick it up at verse 2 to really see how God is that constant in that rise and fall, right? And how God's people continue to lean upon Him, especially to see them through. Because it's not very easy, it's not pretty when we go through that time of upheaval, right, and destruction. Yet God is still with us, and God is still providing for us, and we still trust in Him. So yeah, God is declared design, that I know what I'm doing, and I will break the oppressor's rod, and I will deliver you. And yes, you can rely on Him. That's God's message. And we have a wonderful confession of faith, which we'll study next week. So at this time, I'd like to kind of pause the Bible study. And what I'd like to do is, again, let's say with Pastor Dewitt, if you have any kind of questions that you'd like to ask, again, regarding, I'd say, his topics are military chaplaincy, many years. Serving, I found out you were active, you were reserve, you were also...
Enlisted
I
officer,
enlisted in
all the above.
71 out of high